Hi, I'm Neil Armstrong from TribePad. I'm delighted to be chatting with Sven Elbert from Fosway today. Sven is a genuine expert in all things to do with HR and talent acquisition technology. And we're chatting today about equality, inclusion, and diversity, and specifically how technology can help us in that recruitment space. So, Sven, hi, nice to chat with you.
Hi Neil, good to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So, I mean, look, let's dive in. How important do you think ED&I has become for companies and recruitment teams in particular in the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this as a trend going on for many years. So, societies as a whole wanted to be more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive. And this obviously has seen its impact on, governments, on institutions, corporates, schools, universities, different accentuations there. But definitely, obviously, the events in the US surrounding the death of George Floyd back in 2020 have accelerated attention to the topic, created some civil unrest, even threatened the peace in organizations, and have since very much impacted employee and candidate experience and expectations across the world, not just in the US, but later also into Europe. So from a corporate perspective, as analysts, we see this topic increasingly more and more in our advisory work. The customers are really global. So it's definitely a topic for organizations, and there's good evidence that a more diverse workforce actually makes organizations also more successful. So
Yeah.
finding more diverse talent is really top of mind for organizations in 2022.
Yeah. I think the whole point about not only is this a good thing and the right thing, it's clearly a commercially smart thing to be doing in terms of high performing teams and have the best teams have high levels of diversity in them, and organisations with the best representation tend to be the best performing organisations. So, what do you think about that then? Clearly businesses have always thought this is important, seem to be trying to do more at the moment. What about candidates? How have their views and expectations changed specifically when it comes to applying for roles at a company, do you think?
Yeah, there is now generally an expectation also from the candidate perspective that these application processes, the hiring and selection process is generally more fair and more equitable. And I think they expect that organizations, first of all, make it transparent as to what it is that they are doing, that they have specific goals, specific controls in place around this. There is maybe also sometimes a bit of a reservation from candidates to, provide full ED&I details. So,
Yeah.
in different parts of Europe, it's also a little bit different across the different countries. So giving away, photographs, age, gender details, I think is something that we have seen different adoption in different countries across Europe.
Yeah.
So there's increasingly maybe also a sentiment that candidates expect a more anonymous application, and at least in the earlier stages would prefer that they are considered without all the ED&I details visible to
Yeah.
the organization.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? That trust in an organisation when you're a brand new applicant, why should you trust that organisation? They're asking you these questions. Is that going to help your progress through the recruitment process, or is it going to hinder it? I mean, some companies have been accused of ticking the boxes, but not really delivering on diversity, and maybe some candidates are suspicious of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of talk on the subject, and a lot of the stuff in, maybe 3, 4 years ago was a bit more lip service than it was actually being the reality.
Yeah.
And corporates have obviously given it a lot of attention already in their employer branding, in their employer value proposition. So you would find on the corporate career sites or any of the surrounding pages that there's definitely a lot of marketing speak around that. However, I think there's also a lack of action on the topic overall.
Yeah.
Many organizations, probably the ones we've been talking to, have tried to understand what ED&I really means for them and how they can best kind of fulfill the local needs, because those are quite different. And there's also different compliance needs in different countries and different parts of the world. So this topic is also not easily addressed. There's probably not a one size fits all. So
Yeah.
a lot of the organizations, corporate organizations we've been talking to in the past year have probably done a bit of a stock take in this area. So maybe there is not as much action in some areas yet, but certainly there is an absolute top of mind of employers. And imminently, we can see that a lot of them are looking to make a more aggressive move into this.
Yeah.
And maybe also from a technology perspective, there has been obviously since 2020 from the provider perspective, also a lot of investment going on into that topic. So maybe some of the technology was or is not even yet up to par to support all of that consistently.
Yeah.
But it's definitely been something where we as analysts in the briefings we are getting from vendors, we've seen a lot of additional features, a lot of roadmap, a lot of the R&D investment go into that area.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that is going to come really quickly, I think.
Okay, some really interesting points there. Thanks, Sven. One thing we've seen recently, the firm, that's the Forum for In-House Recruitment Managers here in the UK, they've done some research recently to show that despite lots of good intentions, actually not a lot has changed in terms of outcomes in recruitment for candidates from different backgrounds. And then, as you say, there's lots of talk and there's lots of good intention, but actually the action hasn't been there yet. What do you think the key reasons for that are? You know, is this a really difficult problem to crack, or is the will not there?
Oh, the will, I think, is there from the corporate side. It is, as I said, it's probably not as easily cracked because it can mean different things in different countries and different geographies.
Yeah.
So I think it also needs to be part of a wider strategy and discussion in a company. So whenever we see it's driven more from the top down with measurable targets, using actual data points to check the progress, and also quite important action plans to, make sure that you have certain things that you can improve on an operational level. I think if that's not in place, then it's really difficult to get something going consistently. So many organizations working on that framework, I think, at the moment, and trying to see where they can obviously then fit in their technology to do this on a more consistent level, because you have to think it, from end to end. It doesn't start necessarily with the application. It starts even, maybe when you look at how do you write a job ad, how do you put out something for a candidate pool, like how diverse is the pool, right? So where in what locations do you advertise the roles? So what kind of candidates do you get? There's definitely a lot of attention needed to go across the entire candidate lifecycle, the entire candidate experience and employee experience as well, because it doesn't even stop when you have made a hire, because then that person obviously also is asking, okay, when is my next career move, right? So the internal mobility piece and the diversity, the equity and the inclusion, and that is also something that you need to take into account when you look at this.
Okay, so the will is there, but we know this is a difficult problem to crack with different geographies, culture, legislation to think about. What are the variety of technology solutions out there? We're seeing anonymous applications. We've talked about anti-bias language in the job ad itself, ED&I reporting, randomized questions, randomized answers. What do you think recruitment technology can come in to improve the outcomes for the company and the candidate?
Yeah, I mean, those areas definitely allow companies to put in more equitable processes. Ultimately, it's also an education piece, a change management piece, maybe with managers. So it's not just the technology, but the technology can play a very important part in this process. And I think you definitely need some reporting that spans really across, and you need the data to know if the things are working. And if you set targets, you obviously want to measure where you are at and put up, plans for improvement. I mean, communicating things on the corporate career side with a bit of a marketing touch is good, but having, true employee sentiment there from existing employees, the employee voice visible there, I think is a good starting point. And then, you can take it across to the application process when you redact maybe some information on the resume. Technology can help there with anonymous applications as well. And I think the applicant tracking systems, the talent acquisition systems market has been always very fast to innovate. So probably any corporation not using a provider that is focused enough on talent acquisition, is at risk of falling behind. And particularly in ED&I, that is something which can actually give you a bit of a disadvantage on the job market today. So definitely it's worth looking at what your vendors are doing, and if you have adopted the latest functionalities as well.
Yeah, it's interesting there what you say about speaking to your vendor and understanding what tools are already out there and what tools are on the roadmap. One of the things I saw recently, you probably saw this too, the report from Netflix where they published their annual ED&I stats, and therefore you see a company that has made a commitment in terms of cultural change, has the data to understand how they're performing, and then has the will and the transparency to share that progress. I think, whether it's legislation or organizations like Netflix who are very transparent about what they're doing, there seems to be, that seems to be a good way to understand what best practice looks like, and try to get it across to the industry. What else do you think are the things that organizations can really do to improve ED&I, particularly within recruitment?
Yeah, so definitely leveraging better technology is probably a key part of the equation, and understanding in which parts of the processes you can apply what piece of technology is quite key. There's a lot of vendors out there helping you with more equitable job ad writing and those kind of things. There's vendors who have definitely anonymous application processes who redact the resume information, the information on the resumes and the CV. So there's definitely a lot of stuff out there. I think a lot have also invested in the reporting and analytics capabilities. But really, I think the first step really is to say what are the things that you are gunning for. It's in Germany, it's much around gender bias, in other territories is obviously around ethnic origin, around race. Also, sometimes for managerial positions, it's around university background, these elitist clubs coming from one university only being in your leadership team is also a certain form of, bias, and definitely something where you kind of need to really look what are some of the areas where you can improve. So having that conversation, setting up those metrics and being transparent about it is, I think, the best way. As a candidate, if I was able to see what an organization was doing in real time and putting all those metrics out on the career site in real time with real data for the job that I'm applying to would be the ideal case, because then I can see, okay, are they really taking this, their Women in Tech initiative, are they taking that seriously? And how many women actually get hired? How many women get promoted, right? For this particular example, but also for other areas, obviously, having that information live on the website could actually make a huge difference.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I'm a big believer that transparency builds trust. And I think the things we've touched on today show that organizations have the will, but there's an education job to do internally. There's data to collect, there's targets to set, there's tools to be used, that constant cycle of continuous improvement. But I love the idea of every organization publishing how they're doing, and therefore that in itself building awareness and transparency. How practical do you think that is? A company's going to resist or embrace this idea?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I mean, obviously, I think you need one or two or three to lead the bunch, and then others will follow. With technology and vendor roadmaps, looking at how organizations can differentiate, because it is a differentiator. If you find, every tech role these days is very difficult to fill, right? So being able to differentiate and finding that extra candidate pool and appealing to those candidates can make a big difference for the overall success of the organization. Yeah, so I mean, there's maybe a bit of a thing around, oh, is this a lot of extra work? Can we actually do this? So there's also some, maybe critical points of view that you can have in terms of the
Yeah.
resourcing within an organization that needs to be taken into account. But also here, technology can help with more automation and with better kind of standards and make things easier. So definitely, we would like to see this become more equitable, I think, overall. And it probably needs just one or two or three to lead the bunch and share the success stories, like Netflix, for example.
Absolutely. I think it's a great place to draw this to a conclusion. Talent acquisition professionals are under a huge amount of pressure, lots of hard to fill roles and the need to deliver on this ED&I agenda, which everybody agrees is important. Look, Sven, thank you for your time today. Any last thoughts to share with us?
No, I've really heard a couple of TA leaders quite recently say we are no longer hiring, hiring for diversity is our number one priority. Yeah. It's no longer time to hire, or, even, the quality obviously is always important and time to hire is also always important, but the nuance of seeing diversity of hire being like your top metric up there, I think is a very significant shift. And that is probably the shift we need in the mindset of the recruiting teams as well.
Agreed. That sounds like a really good step in the right direction. Sven, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. Thank you for watching. You can find out more about our Stop the Bias campaign at tribepad.com.